Well, this is Park Farm. It's part of the Great Orme, which is a really, really important place for conservation. It's one of the top 5 sites in the whole of the UK for its diversity of wildflowers and plants. But it's also really important for history and the geology, and it's a really, really beautiful place. Wel, mae Pen y Gogarth yn eithriadol o bwysig I hanes. Ac mae'r stori'n dechrau reit yn ôl yn yr oes efydd, lle yma oedd rhai o'r mwyngloddiau copr mwyaf byd, ac oedd cannoedd a cannoedd o bobl yn gweithio yma. A mae'r holl tirwedd yn dangos hoel y ffermio oedd yn digwydd yn yr oes yna. Ac ar ben hwnna, wrth gwrs, mae yna heina o hanes yn cynnwys yr ffermio sydd wedi digwydd yma am canrifoedd. Lle hwn di'r tirwedd da ni'n mynd I bod yn gofalu am byth yma ar Pen y Gogarth.
This is Monk's Path on the Great Orme, and it's one of my favourite places in the summer. It's amazing at this time of year. It's just covered in wildflowers. Common rock rose and hoary rock rose just cover the slopes, and it's amazing for silver-studded blue. And of course on the Great Orme the silver-studded blue is a subspecies which is unique to the Great Orme. As well as the silver-studded blue, there are lots of other butterflies found in this grassland. 21 different species have been recorded, and there's another speciality for the Great Orme, a subspecies of the grayling butterfly, which is only found here. For many people visiting the Great Orme, one of the spectacles, one of the things that they must see is the goats of the Great Orme, cashmere goats that were introduced over 100 years ago. The goats are an important part of the grazing mix. Sheep will eat grass, but the goats target more the scrub. Behind me on the slope there's a nanny and kid, and the kid's very young. It's only just been born. That's very late. Most of the kids are normally born by the end of March. So it's really unusual to see one that small at this time of year. The Great Orme is a brilliant place for birds. You can see all sorts here. In spring and autumn migration, some really unusual things might turn up, but also it's a really good place for seabirds. There are good numbers of cormorants, guillemots, razorbills, kittiwakes, but my absolute favourite is the cliff nesting chough. And what we can see now is amazing. It's newly fledged young chough pestering their parents for food. It's quite a spectacle. There's lots of noise, lots of activity, lots of chough everywhere. I've been working on the Great Orme for almost 20 years, and the thing that's really fantastic about the National Trust buying Park Farm and the grazing rights is the ability to make long-term plans. We've not had that before in the 20 years that I've been working here. There's always been an element of short-term tenancies which has made a difference to the grazing that can be achieved, and it will make such a difference that the National Trust are here forever.
We're here setting up baseline monitoring on the Orme because we want to see what happens over the next few years when we reintroduce grazing on this area of habitat. So over 5 days we're monitoring a range of grassland and heathland habitats right across the site. And what we're looking for are key species and features which are associated with the unique geology of the Orme. And you can see behind me the limestone cliffs, and it's the limestone which really makes the Orme a very, very special place, because we've got plants here which are closely associated with the limestone. The problem is that if these areas aren't grazed properly, they become very coarse and rank and covered in grass, and you start to lose some of these rare limestone species. And if you look here, you can see clearly that this patch of habitat is really grassy, it's got a thick thatch of dead material, and actually hasn't got very many flowering plants. Whereas where the soil is thinner, and you might see it again behind me on the cliffs, there's a lot of flowering plants, a lot of the rock rose, which is the bright yellow flower. And it's that which we're trying to promote by grazing more heavily at the right time of year with the right animals, so that we create a more flowery grassland rather than what we have now, a very grass-dominated grassland. First thing we do is measure the height of the vegetation, and we take 5 readings at the corners and then the middle of the quadrat. After that, we look for this thatch, which I've talked about before, underneath the vegetation, and we do a percentage cover for that. The next step is to look at the balance of flowering plants, so what we call herbs against grasses, and we do that as a percentage cover, so we say how much grass there is and how much herbs there are. We then look for key indicator species, so these are our calcareous flowering plants. And then we look for negative species, so we stand up then and we look for negative species 2 metres around the quadrat. So that's things like non-natives and invasive species. And the final step is counting how many plants there are within each cell of the quadrat which are either flowering or producing seed. The Great Orme is important not just in Wales but in the whole of the UK, and actually at a European level as well. And we've got plants here which occur nowhere else, like some of the native cotoneasters which you'll find on these cliffs behind me. And we've got other rare species like the hoary rock rose, Helianthus mecanum, and species which are very uncommon like spiked speedwell. So it's an incredibly important site, and that's all due to its proximity to the sea and to this limestone bedrock.
Well, what the National Trust bought here is 140 acres of this land behind me, and it's surrounded by this 3,000 metre long dry stone wall. And it's interesting that the very best bits for wildlife are all around the outside. And in fact, the middle bit, the bit that we bought, is the least interesting from the point of view of wildlife. But this is where the sheep and the grazing rights reside. So that enables the National Trust to then farm beyond its boundaries and to graze all of this high-grade habitat and improve it for wildlife. And also, we're hoping to improve the land within the wall for wildlife as well. So I call it the Polo Mint property. We bought the hole in the middle, and all the tasty bits are the bits around the outside. But we're going to be working to keep the bits around the outside as tasty as possible forever. So this wall is a really important feature in the landscape. It's important for its beauty, it's important for the wildlife, and it's important for the sheep that shelter in it during storms. So we're really keen to restore it. And our new ranger here, Doug, who's been working on the wall already, has been offering opportunities for passers-by and local people to get involved with the walling so they can play a part in its restoration.
This is a great wall to work on. It's really good fun. There's loads of interesting things to find in it. These little shells here are called brachiopods, and they're just like prehistoric mussels. But elsewhere in the wall there are pieces of coral, and there are lots of things called crinoids, which look like stacks of buttons but were really little sea worms.
These footpaths, they were put in originally when the wall was built 150 years ago, but you know, for many, many years now these have been closed and there's been no public access at all. And that's been one of the exciting things about this project, is that we can now reopen these old lost paths. And one of the things that Doug and I are talking about is where the routes are going to go, and we're talking to our partners about the best place to take all these routes to make the most interesting and exciting walks for people. So what you see here at Park Farm is a great example of what we're calling the Land, Outdoors and Nature programme in the Trust. And that stems from the awareness that we've got to do something to halt the decline in wildlife throughout the whole country. And what we need is bigger, better, more and connected habitats. So if you come back here in years to come, what you'll see here at the Great Orme is the National Trust bit will be much more diverse in its wildlife habitat and nicer to look at, more diversity, more colour, more texture. And then the bits beyond the land that we've been helping our partners to restore will be much richer for wildflowers and for bird life. So put all together, it's a fantastic package of conservation work which shows the way for how we should be looking after all our countryside in the National Trust.